Everyone, welcome to Naval Theater. I'm Curious Mirage, exploring the ships, people, events, and theory that make maritime history so fascinating. One problem consistent to late entry into any competition is, how do we catch up to the current leader? Well, in the naval arms races, this gets even more complicated, as you don't simply get a handicap until you catch up. You have to get your ships from somewhere. Many startup navies took the route of purchasing ships from abroad. Argentina, Brazil, Chile, Japan, and even Russia all purchased warships from the French, the British, or even from the Americans at some point in the late 1800s and early 1900s. France had a slightly different problem. Longtime rivals with the Royal Navy, France didn't have as extensive an empire to fund or provide materials for a massive battle fleet. After resetting the race with Gloire in 1860, where Britain simply met the challenge with her own line of ironclads, France was again starting to fall behind as the 19th century wore on. Unable to match the British in numbers, other options needed to be considered. This led to the rise of the Jeune, literally translating to young school. The Jeune was a movement based around new generations of officers who looked away from the battle line as the main method of standing up to Britain's dominance of the sea. The basic principle was to arm smaller vessels with better weapons that could destroy or disable ships of the line. One thing that made this line of thinking possible was the development of the self-propelled torpedo. Until the late 1800s, torpedoes were stationary moored charges, what we now know as mines. Self-propelled torpedoes, such as the Whitehead, opened up new dimensions in naval warfare, allowing explosive charges to be delivered below the armor of a warship's hull, easily ripping into her vitals, without relying on the ship meandering into a stationary minefield. The Jeune also advocated a return to the idea of the guerre de course. This translated to war of chase, or, simply put, commerce raiding. Fast, sometimes purpose-built ships would deploy singly or in small groups to capture or sink merchant ships, diverting the flow of materials from the enemy nation. This was especially appealing to the French, since their main target, Britain, had such a large merchant fleet. Both these ideas combined to make the submarine especially appealing. After the CSS H.L. Hunley demonstrated that the submarine could be an effective weapon, many countries began to take note across the globe. The French developed the plongeur in the late 1860s, and by the turn of the century, France was one of the world leaders in submarines. While early submarines suffered from short range and dive times, they soon began to improve dramatically on both. The third major development that the Jeune was at least partially responsible for was the rise of the torpedo boat. These small craft were armed with, shock and awe, torpedoes as their primary weapon. The idea being that these cheap, small craft could sink or cripple much larger warships, mitigating the superior numbers of an enemy fleet without the massive costs of building one of your own. Such was the stock put in the threat of torpedo boats that they spurred the development of an entire ship type just to hunt them down. Torpedo boat destroyers, or, as we all know them today, simply destroyers. Ironically, the Jeune inspired the most change in navies outside of France. Admiral Sir Jackie Fisher based his beloved battlecruiser concept on the principles of the Jeune. Sacrifice armor to achieve long range and high speed, and attack the enemy abroad. Germany took a liking to the torpedo, and is arguably the most famous user of the submarine, eclipsing the early French lead. Germany also took the commerce raider and ran with it, employing them extensively in both world wars, where France had to help hunt them down. In practice, the theories of the Jeune were a mixed bag of success. Commerce raiding was quite useful in tying down disproportionate numbers of enemy ships, but it only managed to bring the target nation to its knees during the U.S. submarine campaign against Japan in 1941-45. Torpedo boats, and their successor the destroyer, had their ups and downs too. While they proved able to tackle larger ships, they were most frequently used as escorts to cruisers, battleships, and aircraft carriers. Destroyers are also, arguably, the modern capital ship for many countries. Some of the latest classes run into the billions of dollars range in costs, hardly the inexpensive weapon envisioned by the Jeune École a century and a half ago. While the submarine's rise to prominence was according to the Jeune École's standards, like the destroyer, they've gone from the cheap alternative to a battle fleet to some of the most expensive warships in the world, most second only to supercarriers. The torpedo, however, remains a cheap way to take down expensive warships with low cost, aside from their delivery platforms. Thanks for watching! If you have any questions, please leave a comment and I'll try to answer them. And I hope you'll join us next time when we look at the Grumman F4F Wildcat.